Hi, I'm J.W. Stewart, a veteran broadcaster and journalist with nearly 30 years' experience. I've worked at ESPN and NBC, and now I teach at the University of New Haven.
And I'm Cheyenne Zenger, Director of Athletics at the University of New Haven. Prior to that, Director of Athletics at the University of Kansas and Illinois State University. The first 15 years of my career, however, was a college football coach and an athletic administrator. This is the Dr. Z and J-Dub podcast.
Hi again, everybody, and welcome back to the Dr. Z and J-Dub podcast, brought to you by our presenting sponsor, the Pink Clover Foundation. Thank you for joining us across all of our social media platforms today. And as always, our podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. Today, our guest is Steve Levy, who's done a little bit of everything at ESPN, including, most recently, as the voice of Monday Night Football. The NHL is returning to ESPN next season, and Steve was a big part of the coverage on ESPN the last time around, so we'll talk about that with him as well. Steve is in the green room and will join us in just a moment. And speaking of green, happy St. Patrick's Day, Dr. Z. It's great to see you.
Hey, same to you, J-Dub.
Thank you very much. Real quick, I know St. Patrick's Day is a big deal in your family. Is that right?
It's my wife's favorite holiday. Her maiden name's McInerney, and my first name's an Irish last name, and so together our kids are pretty loaded up on the Irish heritage.
Very good. Very good. Well, we are thrilled here at the University of New Haven to announce to those who are not aware that spring sports are back. And thank goodness for that. It's been a long year. Dr. Z, give our audience an idea of who's back playing and what's going on so far.
So if I've got the numbers right, after 371 days, we came back and competed in softball and lacrosse and tennis on Saturday. Baseball had a game that was pushed back, so we ended up having an inter-squad scrimmage, which I was glad just to see the guys out there. Track and field is preparing for competition, but after 371 days, that was a big moment for UNH athletics.
No doubt, and certainly the future looks bright, and we hope that this continues and everything, the numbers stay low. We can continue right through the spring and then right into the fall as well. So we're very blessed to have that here at the University of New Haven, and we're also very grateful and thankful to have our guest today, and that's Steve Levy. And we'll bring Steve out from the green room. Steve's very gracious to join us. He's been making the rounds in the podcasts recently, so we're glad that he's been able to find some time and join us here in the Dr. Z and J-Dub podcast. Steve, it's great to see you. First of all, not only welcome, but let me wish you a belated happy birthday. I know you had a birthday on Friday. What did you do to celebrate?
I went out and got my shot. I got my vaccine shot, Truth be told, I was already eligible for a year because I just turned Joe DiMaggio 56. But that's kind of how I celebrated getting the shot. So I actually feel really good about it. It was a pretty good process. I encourage anyone who's, the downside is being too old, is being old enough to get it, right? And then you got to go through the process and wait in line and all that. But I feel pretty good about the first one. We'll see how I do with the second one in a few weeks from now. But JW, always nice to see you. Dr. Z, a pleasure as well.
Hey, glad to have you here. This is exciting. You being on all these podcasts today, though, tells me that I'm not abnormal. I think I've got about 30 podcasts on my iPhone, and I listen to about 5 of them. But every time someone recommends one, I load it. Right. I'm always going to listen to it. But this podcast world's a whole new thing, isn't it?
It's kind of amazing how we went all those years without it, right? It's hard to come up with something new, right? And yet people keep churning out new ideas, and I guess that's how you get to become really rich. But it's neat to be able to go in depth. JW knows from our world, it's everything's sound bites, and what can you say in 22 seconds, and what can the analyst say in between plays, and everything is so measured and tight. And the producer in your ear quite often doesn't care anything about what you're saying. I know it's great. I got great stuff. They don't care. They want to know, can you make it in time to get us to commercial break? So these podcasts allow you to go, obviously a little more in depth, and that's actually very enjoyable to be able to tell some stories and tell some truths.
After J-Dub and I'd done 1 or 2 of these, I was asking our executive producer, Rob Thompson, I felt like I told too many stories. He goes, no, that's what podcast is.
Right.
do it because I was living the world. I was used to the 10-minute interviews, being on the other end, and you get in and off in it and out. And man, podcasting, you get to do a little more of this.
And apparently you can have some colorful language too, which is not really my thing, but apparently, JW was swearing like a sailor back in the day. Potty mouth, that JW.
Yeah, fortunately we had the 7-second delay and the finger was always on the button.
Good times.
Hey, speaking of storytelling, let's get into it here with Steve, who's done a little bit of everything at ESPN. He's anchored Sports Center, voice of Monday Night Football, has called, NHL games, college football games. But I guess we'll start off with this. And think about this list. Keith Jackson, Howard Cosell, Frank Gifford, Al Michaels, Mike Tirico, and Steve Levy. Steve, when you hear that, what do you think?
It's uncomfortable, quite frankly. I just don't see myself, I really see myself as the regular guy. And, I'll be doing an hour Sports Center tonight on ESPN2, and the other night I was on the set for 4 hours doing the same highlights, 3 times. So that's sort of been my home. And listen, I always thought I was the luckiest guy in the business doing Sports Center. I mean, that's been the best seat in sports forever. And now to be able to do some other things. But yeah, Monday Night Football was off the charts, and it's become cliche, the whole dream job. But I can't come up with a better phrase. That literally was my dream job. And to have done it for a season, hopefully many more to come. That's been a real honor and a pleasure. Again, I'm the luckiest guy in the industry. I really feel that way. And to be at ESPN all these years has been a great company to work for, and has really taken care of my family really very nicely.
Steve is the 7th play-by-play voice for Monday Night Football. Joe Tessitore is the other. So to put that in perspective, more men have walked on the moon, 12, than have Monday Night Football games, 7.
Yeah, I never heard that before. I mean, that's when you put it that way. Yeah. So listen, if I can do this for 20 years or so, then I'll become. I still probably won't be comfortable being in that group. I mean, that was one of the big kicks of Monday night. It just fell, and some of this is fluky, right? So we happened to fall on the 50th anniversary. It actually, the date actually fell on a Monday, which is, the odds of that happening and all that stuff. And so we were in Las Vegas, and somebody had a great idea. I think it was our producer, Phil Dean. They put us in the canary yellow jackets, right, from the old days. And I'm sure the young kids are like, oh, what are these guys wearing? Although Louis Riddick looks good and everything, but Greasy and I, not so much. And but it was a real kick, and that was the throwback. And we had a soundbite from, Howard Cosell leading into us. And I remember thinking, you know what? I'm kind of like all of our audience who has just seen that, Dandy Don and Gifford. And I'm thinking everybody, including me, would rather have those 3 broadcast tonight's game, But it was, the whole thing's really cool. I have to pinch myself all the time. But the men who walked on the moon, those are 2 good lists to be on, I'd say.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, what was it like for you the first time you were in the booth and you heard the iconic theme song? What reaction did you have?
So I got a little taste of it 2 seasons ago now. The opening week, ESPN gets a doubleheader, a Monday night doubleheader. It's the only time it happens. And the reason for that, obviously, we can't get a last week game because it would shorten the week going into the playoffs, would be an unfair advantage. So they give us 2 games week 1. And so Greasy Riddick and myself got that second game 2 seasons ago. It was the Broncos and the Raiders. I was really thrilled. I had never been to the Black Hole. I'd been to an Oakland A's game, but it's not the same thing. But to go to a Raider game at night in the old Coliseum was really awesome. And Tim Corrigan, I don't know if you remember him, JW, he was producing the game. And so the theme rolls, and I'm supposed to say, hit this billboard, Monday Night Football is brought to you by Budweiser, whatever it was. And Tim Corrigan gets in my ear, and he's like, go, Steve. And I'm like, and now I think he thinks I'm nervous, like I'm panicking. He's like, okay, Steve, anytime. He's whispering. He's being very gentle in my ear. okay, Steve, anytime, start speaking. Now, Greasy gives me an elbow in the gut, and I'm like, everybody, relax. I got this. I just want to hear the music. Can I let the music wash over me for a second? This is my moment here. Give me this. So that was the sort of, welcome to Monday Night Football thing. I'll be honest, I thought I was going to be more nervous than I actually was. I had prepped, like for nothing I'd ever prepped for before. I got to Oakland 6 days before the game, something ridiculous. I mean, I was so raring to go and so good. And then, once the theme rolls and you get past that, and then it's just, doing football. So, but that was the moment for sure.
J-Dub, as I hear those stories, for me, so much of what happened in your childhood stays with you. I've heard that the music that you like the best is from when you were a child. My brother and sister were older than me, 8 years and 6 years. And so, man, the music from the 70s, the music they listened to in high school is still my favorite stuff. Well, as you're talking about this, Keith Jackson will forever be my favorite voice, right? But Monday Night Football will forever be Howard Cosell. So just think, Steve, in another 30 years, there'll be kids out there talking about Steve Levy, the next Howard Cosell, right?
Yeah. And when you say Cosell, and people don't realize this, a massive part of Monday Night Football in those days was halftime, right? Because that was the only place to see the highlights from the whole league, right? Other than the 2 or 3 games you got in your home market. So Cosell doing highlights over that iconic music. And I feel like, as I remember, maybe my parents would tell you differently, but that was kind of the cutoff. They let me watch like the first half through halftime to see the highlighghts, and then you had to go to bed, on a school night. So, but it's amazing that halftime could be such a big part of the broadcast, and it was back then.
I don't know about you. We had 2.5 channels where I grew up. ABC was on UHF, and I had to spin this little thing around. And so when you got a game on there, that was like an extra game of the week or something. But the filter by which we got our information was so small. There'd be
and that's the reason the Cowboys, I think, really became America's team. They were that 4 o'clock game nationally, seemingly every week, and Roger Staubach and Tony Dorsett and Drew Pearson and all those guys, right? And so, and that's why there's a country, filled with Cowboy fans that have, never been to the state of Texas. You know what I mean? So
we talk on this show all the time. I'm a Chiefs fan, but I grew up. Roger Staubach was my guy. Tony Dorsett, who I had the opportunity to meet at the Walter Camp 2 years ago. That was, I don't usually get enamored with meeting people, but meeting Tony Dorsett was a big deal.
Special guy. Yep. Special player.
Yeah. Steve, the answer's over your shoulder, but I'll ask the question anyhow. Who did you grow up rooting for?
Yeah, there it is. So we did all our Zoom meetings for Monday Night Football. A lot of them were Fridays before we departed for the city. And so we had the Patriots and the Jets. And I did have the foresight before the Bill Belichick Zoom that we're having right now. I took that down. There was a blank space behind my head. Pretty sure Tom Brady's aware of it, and so that's tricky. Can't be an independent journalist and all that. Well, nobody's raised that way, right? When you're 8 years old, you're not an independent journalist. So as Scott Van Pelt always says, we're all from someplace, and we don't get to choose that. And so, I grew up in Queens and Long Island and in Manhattan, and the Jets were always my team, and I would still like them to do well. And so I had to block that out for the Patriots-Jets game with New England wanted a field goal at the gun. And the Jets blew another game in a collapse. So, listen, the upside, I don't think we'll see the Jets too many times on Monday night this season. I mean, I haven't seen the schedule, but just based on past performance, so they'd be safe for another year.
Steve, you've been at ESPN a long time, as you mentioned, since 1993. Many people don't know your path to ESPN. How did you get to ESPN?
So JW, I'll tell you, I hesitate telling the story because it's so unrealistic now for young people, but it's the truth. And, I've already documented how fortunate and, really lucky I think I've been. And I was able to work in New York City really right out of college. Now, not for a lot of money. I think I made $20 a day. I did the Jet Report. I made that an 8-hour full-time job when the Jets were training at Hofstra. but I was on WNBC radio. And for my 60 taped seconds, I was on a major, that was Howard Stern in the morning and Imus, and that was the flamethrower, right? That is WNBC radio, all that stuff, right? And so I had some breaks, and I knew my dad had a connection with an agent, would help me out get into the business, and that led to Dave Sims, and Mike Breen was the number 2 guy at that point there. And so that's sort of how I started. And then WFAN started, the All Sports Radio in New York. I started doing updates there, worked with Mike and Chris, Mike and the Mad Dog. So that took on legs of its own. And then somebody called out sick one night on MSG Network, and I was doing, halftime of the Knicks game, and Marv Albert is throwing to me, and so I was a bit player there. And then the same thing happened at Channel 2, WCBS in New York. And so then I sort of evolved into a full-time, I was doing 4 days at the Fan on radio, and Fridays and Saturdays as the number 2 at WCBS Channel 2 TV in New York. I mean, that's a great gig for a 27-year-old kid who grew up in the area. I was living in a high-rise in Manhattan. And so fast forward to things are great. I'm having the time of my life, and ESPN calls. And that was one of the benefits of working in that area. The executives at ESPN could see and hear my work, unbeknownst to me. But so they called, and they made an offer, and it was a really nice offer. But no, I'm not going to Bristol. I'm single and living in Manhattan, and I have these 2 great jobs. I'm good. And they came back a second time with a better offer. And I remember going to my boss at Channel 2, and I'm like, listen, is there any more work you can give me? Don't make me go. I don't want to go, And they're like, Steve, you're too young. It's New York. You're not going to be the number 1 guy here. And, we had, all stars running through there. And so, by the way, I would have never left. And CBS has been through 30 sportscasters in those 30 years, Channel 2. But I finally did. My agent at the time said it's ESPN. They're not going to come back a third time. And so I took a shot. I couldn't get anything more out of Channel 2. Not money, but in terms of airtime. And so I went to Bristol. And obviously it's the single greatest move of my career. And really, other than the birth of my 3 kids, has been the best move I have ever made. And I remain, luckiest guy on the planet.
That's a great story. And that's one all of our students and our athletes who are listening can learn from. You prepare. It's all about preparation, getting ready for that opportunity. You never know when it's going to knock. Yeah,
listen, I worked really hard, right? I mean, I did put in my dues. Again, like I tell you about that thing at Hofstra for the Jets. I mean, 8 hours, making $20, it was $50, but it was on the air. But I was around professionals, right? I was in an NFL locker room. I was seeing how the real people in the industry do it, how they work. And I worked every weekend and every night shift and every bad shift that no one wanted, and every summer and all that stuff. And I did everything, by the way. And that's one of the things I share with young people who want to get in the industry. You can't say no. You can't say no. Nothing is beneath you. Oh, I don't like that sport. Nobody cares. Figure it out. Learn the sport. Prepare for it. Because if you don't, someone else will say yes, and they will gain that much needed experience and open door that could have been yours. So listen, you got to get lucky. Don't be ashamed to take advantage of connections or breaks you might have. Everybody else would do it too if they were in that place. And I did everything I possibly could. So at ESPN, the first job there, this is way before LA, I was doing SportsCenter at 2:30 a.m. Eastern time, 2:30 a.m. Eastern time, 5 nights a week. I mean, that'll mess up your body clock a little bit, but I wanted the gig, man. I wanted to be in sports television.
Yeah, I think I'm one of the few guys who watches that.
Yeah.
Back in my younger days when I was coaching, you'd be on the road. You didn't sleep a lot. You wake up, you're going to kick off anywhere from 11 to 1 to 4 to whatever. And you're in the room with your roommate. Usually I was with the O-line guy, and you'd have SportsCenter on. And by the time you've heard it 3 or 4 times, you realize you've heard this before. And during the pandemic, the same things happened to me. When I have to quarantine, when I've been on the road, I just leave it on ESPN. And, about the 4th time I've heard SportsCenter, I finally switch over to ESPN2. Right? That's kind
I
of
appreciate that. Yeah, I tell people, look, it's the same bad joke. I'm wearing the same tie. If news breaks, it's not going to be me telling you about it. A chance are I'm sleeping probably when you're watching.
exactly. Yeah.
I appreciate you having cable TV too, Dr. Z. That's
Hey, I will keep it until someone comes and cuts it out of my. It's just part of the fabric of. Again, I had 2.5 stations growing up. I think cable's the best thing ever.
Yep, I agree with you.
Not a commercial for it. I hate the commercials that make fun of it. Makes me mad.
Steve, I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to get this this topic to talk to you about because, of course, the big news the last week or so is that the NHL is coming back to ESPN. Anyone who knows you knows you're a huge NHL fan. You were a big part of ESPN's coverage the last time around. So after this long hiatus, and you look back at some of those times the first time around, what are some of the fond memories you have of the NHL on ESPN?
Well, the music, which is coming back, by the way, it's amazing the demand for the music. And we talked about the nostalgia earlier, right? With the uniforms and the Monday night music. So we can save a few bucks on that because the music's already set. It's already done. So listen, I was lucky to do it with people who love doing it also. Like, it's a shame the audience, they only know the announcers, right? The people on screen and on the microphone, but there were so many people really at ESPN behind the scenes who just lived and died with the sport. Like, so many major hockey fans. I remember when we lost the rights, this is 2004 or whatever that might've been. It was like people had lost their puppy, that people were openly sobbing in Bristol around the building. So the property means so much to everyone at ESPN. And many of us have been fortunate enough to remain. So while that was the lowest of lows, the highest of high was getting it back then, So people were so happy. Last Thursday, I think it was. But I did those 3 really long games, which, I've sort of been synonymous with. And that also is just fluke luck. That's not a skill. There's no talent involved. It's just happen to be in the right place at the right time, doing 5 overtime games and stuff. And so, but people remember the great promos, those black and white commercials. Jay Harris walks into the elevator with the New Jersey Devil, going up or going down. Jay gets out of the elevator. Like, there's so many great things. And honestly, NBC, there's just so many ways to broadcast hockey, right? And NBC did a great job with the games. We're going to do a great job with the games. But I think where ESPN can bring something else to the table is the promotion in and around the game, SportsCenter going into it, SportsCenter coming out of it, the in-between periods.com. We have so many vehicles to promote and show love for the sport. And, we do take care of our own, right? And when I say our own properties. And it's great to have the NHL back in the family. And we'll definitely do our best to take care of them.
I can tell you this, Dr. Z, when working in the studio, the years that Steve was out calling games, if you saw him at a playoff hockey game or a playoff college football game, which you did some of the long ones as well there, you turned to your co-anchor and said, strap in, it's going to be a long night.
Yeah, I do remember like going into arenas, you see all the newspaper people and they're just shaking their heads, there goes that deadline. There's no shot of making the first edition or, whatever. So back in the newspaper days when it wasn't so easy to get a story in, but no, fond memories, man. And the people who play the game are terrific people too. Again, you've heard that before. Of all the athletes you get to cover, hockey people, and that's not just the players, people around the team, people around the rinks, just really good human beings.
Dr. Z, any final questions for Steve before we let him go?
Man, I just really appreciate having you on here. This is, we'll have this in the books for those kids 30 years from now when they're talking about the new Howard Cosell.
I hope I'm around to watch it again and to replay this bit. And so I hope my memory is good enough for that too. But Dr. Z, I appreciate you having you on. JW, I miss you. It was great working with you back in the day. And it's great to see you've had so much success right now at UNH.
Oh, thank you, Steve. That means a lot. Right back at you, buddy. It was an honor and a privilege to be in the same building with you and Scott Van Pelt and Stuart Scott and Butcher Gross and Anderson and all the great guys who are still there. Please tell everyone there I said hello. And once we're on the other side of this pandemic, Steve, and now everyone gets vaccinated like you are, we'd love to have you down to campus, and we'll run you through the UNH car wash. We got the ESPN car wash, runs through the UNH car wash.
Throwing a pizza, right? There must be a coupon for a slice of pizza someplace too, right, J-Dub?
Dr. Z will treat, yes.
Hey, I grabbed one yesterday. I'm going to grab another one today.
Sounds good, fellas. Be well. Stay healthy.
Steve, thanks a lot. All the best to you and your family. That's Steve Levy from ESPN, who's done, like I said, done a little bit of everything. Sports Center and college football and Monday Night Football and the NHL as well. And we expect him to be involved in ESPN's NHL coverage once again. Real quick, just want to thank again our sponsor, the Pink Clover Foundation, and their ongoing battle against cancer. For more information, log on to pinkcloverfoundation.org. I should explain the car wash inside the Beltway humor there, Dr. Z. When people come to ESPN to do interviews, so coaches and athletes and celebrities, ESPN runs them through what we call the car wash. So you do Sports Center interview, then you'd be on, let's say, NFL Live, and then it would be ESPN Radio, and then you'd have to do .com and whatever podcasts you're doing. So they call it running through your car wash. I think if we get Steve down to campus, our car wash is probably this podcast and maybe a class, and that's about it.
Yep.
Little bit easier.
I think a moment on Lake Street Beach and a burger or wings at the dive bar, right? Then we've done it.
That's a plan. Steve's a great guy. We appreciate him spending some time with us today, as he's very busy going from, as he said, one podcast to another. What did you take away? What did you unpack from what Steve told us today?
I love just how open he was, and whether you're an alum or a student or whatever, he was all in. It didn't take much to get him to go with the stories. And I just really appreciated that. And, much like some of the other ESPN guys you've had on here, or in some of our alums who have done very well in life, they all talk about, you never say no. Seize that first opportunity. I tell our sports management classes all the time, seek opportunity, then responsibility, then title, then money. If you ever get those out of order, you're not going to make it. Right. Your foot in the door, volunteer, and then just do anything anybody asks. And he just reiterated that, for any of our students out that were listening today.
Yep. Dr. Z, I know you're a big fan of the word authentic, and Steve Levy is very authentic. What you see is what you get. What you just witnessed and what you just heard here on the podcast is who he is in real life. That's who he is on the air, but it's who he is when you talk to him just like this, or you talk to him in the halls of ESPN. And I think that's one of the common denominators between the people that we've had on, especially the people who have worked at ESPN, either past or present. People like Steve, Chris Berman, Dan Patrick, Paul Severino, right, with the Marlins, right? They're all authentic. And I think that's another lesson that we try to impart to anyone who's listening or watching this podcast.
Dang, J-Dub, I didn't know you listened that closely to things. It is one of my favorite words. I don't like the word transparent. I think it's overused and people misuse it. And usually when someone says, I'm being transparent, it's the new word for, well, let me be honest with you. Well, what, you weren't being honest before, you weren't being transparent before, you're either authentic or you're not, Did you notice, by the way, it's baseball season? I've been playing with this the whole time. It's one of my nervous favorite things to do. And watching the games, the scrimmage the other day, my youngest son isn't here to catch for. And so I'm just looking for someone who will, play catch with me right now.
It's the perfect physically distant sport, right? You can go out and have a catch.
It is. I love that. I never heard that phrase either till I moved here. Someone wrote, someone at the register wrote, I was talking about watching someone play catch. And he said, I talked about someone having a catch. And I called you or somebody else, said, what's having a catch? Did he miss? Is that an error? No, that's what it's called here.
Yeah, that's the New England phrase. At least here, I never heard anything else but having a catch. You go out to have a catch with your dad or your mom or whoever, or your brother or sister, whoever it is, but it's always having a catch, at least here in this neck of the woods.
Wow. I think. I'm not sure.
Before we wrap up, I wanted to get Broccoli Rob Thompson, our producer, his thoughts on what Steve Levy said. As we know, Broccoli Rob has spent a good part of his career doing broadcasting, both in radio and now in the podcast scene. Rob, what I don't know if you've met Steve before, but your thoughts on what he said today on our podcast.
I think the story that he told about his first day with Monday Night Football,
Yeah.
and I think we've all had it. If you think about, JW, your time sitting behind that desk, and Dr. Z, your time, at probably the NCAA tournament or whatever. And I remember I certainly had my times of, man, I can't believe this is happening to me. I can't believe this moment. How lucky and grateful you are. And he just wanted to capture that moment. And I sat there listening to him thinking, trying to put myself in his shoes for a second. I got chills. I'm like, how cool would that be? Just listen to Monday Night Football on your headset, knowing that I'm up. It's on me. It's pretty cool.
It is. It is. And I'm glad he told that story too, because I was not aware of it, but it makes sense, right? You want that music to wash over you, soak in the moment, right? Let it, in TV, we always talk about let it breathe. And, that's what he was trying to do. But he's got greasy elbowing him in the ribs and the producer talking to him in his ear. Hey, man, I got it.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't enjoy the moments as much, when you get there. And then you look back and you're like, man, I wish I enjoyed that kind of special moment. I think I was too whatever. But it seemed like he really enjoyed that moment, and knowing that this is the first time ever, and the weight of, he's one of 9 that have been able to do that. One of 7.
Yeah, well, 7. Yeah, one of 7 to do it. Yeah, in terms of the strict play-by-play people. Yeah,
I threw 2 in there just for luck.
Rob, what you said right there, we get to have a lot of philosophical discussions, and I'll often go, okay, man, that's a phrase I want to hang on to for a few days or a week. And what you just said right there, I let's take what Levy left with us and everything he talked about, what we're talking about here. And I think back in my own life to 3 of my favorite years of my career were coaching at football at the University of Wyoming. And as I drove out of Laramie, Wyoming for the next job, which was in administration, it dawned on me how fast those 3 years went. And I vowed never to take another job for granted again that I was enjoying, because they go too fast. And there's a saying, and this saying almost haunts me. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And to your story, J Dubs and Steve's, all you have to do is start somewhere. You never know where it's going to lead you. And a lot of career seekers think they have to go directly to an ESPN or directly to the NFL. You could start off on local radio and still get there. You could start off with your own podcast. Someone's going to find you, and I just think along the way, that journey along the way, you said it best, Z. You just think about the moment that we're in right now. We don't know who's watching this or listening to this. Heck, we could be all on CNBC next week. We don't know. So,
or at the very least, I remember when we started doing this last March, you talked us into it, Rob. I mean, I pushed you back for a year, or you said you ought to do a podcast. Do a podcast. And I don't want to do one by myself. I don't want to do a monologue. I need a partner. I need someone who's done this before. And we had J Dub just, with all the expertise, and we put that together and start doing it out of my living room, at first, over in Brantford, and fast forward, I remember as the pandemic started going, people said, when you look back at the end of this pandemic being over, what would you regret not doing? This would be what I regretted not doing. This has been, this past year, the single most fun thing I've enjoyed. And, we've had breaks for vacation, or I've been out fundraising, or J Dub's plate got real full, but I miss it really, really bad. And then when we come back to it, it's always, I'm like, why don't we do this every other day?
And when you work with somebody like J Dub, who is a true pro at this, you realize how inexperienced you are at any type of broadcasting or interviews. And I watch J Dub every time on this, and J Dub, your questions, how you tee it up, how you angle that question, it's just, you could just tell you're such a pro at this. And it's really, I was texting with John before, it's just an honor to watch you do this, because God, I mean, we're like Boy Scouts compared to you on this thing.
Okay, that's a nice way of saying it, as long as Zing doesn't get in the way. Oh, really good. Yeah, thank you.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Dr. Z. I appreciate it. But you learn this stuff at ESPN. So a lot of the stuff that Steve has learned, I've learned too. We learn from the same people. Not only the people that you work with side by side, but ESPN has had talent coaches and interview gurus and stuff like that to help you with your game, right? You're never satisfied with just making it to ESPN. You want to be able to succeed and get better and be stronger. And a lot of the stuff I've learned at ESPN are things that I use here in the podcast and also in my teaching here at the University of New Haven. So, as Steve said, for him, it was an important part of his life, and it was a huge part of my life for 12 years too. And I'm grateful for the time that I had there because it gave me a lot of friends. And it also gave me a wealth of experience on which, kind of springboard to do other things in my life.
I'm not saying anything. Go ahead, Dr. Z.
I'm just thinking, we've talked about it, and I think it's almost time to do it. Is one of the forthcoming podcasts needs to be with Broccoli Rob front and center, and just I'm enjoying this conversation. We need to do that, and talk about history of UNH and West Haven, and we've had Rob on for a splice here and there, but I think that'd be a lot of fun.
I mean, it's when you start talking on how deep the stories are and all the different parts, I'm really the one thing that I like the most about UNH, what I'm doing here now, is helping our students discover what their path is. And I think that the discovery process, I'm sure you both of you guys as educators, that's such a big part of it. And the one little hack I'll share the story and then I'll shut up, but it just happened within the last month or two. I had a grad who was working with me and wants to be in the sports industry, and the kid's an absolute animal. And I said, the way to break into this industry is start a podcast. And I said, as a matter of fact, take over my podcast, interview with influencers. I said, here's what I want you to do, because I used it as the biggest hack, was how I started it. I said, I want you to call up, reach out to, text, however you get in front of every single team you want to work for, find out who that hiring person is in sales, right? It's probably the vice president of sales, tickets or sponsorship or biz dev or chief of revenue, and ask them for an interview to have them tell you about their career path. So he picked out 5 teams, got in touch with each one of them, interviewed each one of them, great interviews, teed up some questions for them. Every single team offered him a job. Every single one of those guys he's interviewed, I'm looking for a job. Oh God, because he knew they had openings. And so he is right now a sales executive with the Tennessee Titans. So the Falcons, every single team, the Nationals, all of them, you know how many hundreds of applications they get? But I think podcasting, I wish it was a different name too, because I agree with John. I don't think it's the coolest name ever, but I think podcasting is such a way it gives JW a voice still out there. It gives you a voice, Z. It gives all of us a voice, and it gave Mike a voice to get a job as well. So if you can use it properly and you can share your story with other people. Anyways, so that's long-winded, but that was my story, and I'm proud of it.
Good one. That's a good one.
Broccoli Rob, as always, thanks for all you do for the podcast. We appreciate it. And we'll see you soon. That's Broccoli Rob Thompson joining us from his home in Florida. And not only do we thank Broccoli Rob, we thank our executive producer, John Mays, and the Pink Clover Foundation once again. Their mission to provide research, education, and awareness in the battle against breast cancer. To learn more or to lend your support as we seek a cure, visit pinkcloverfoundation.org. Dr. Z, final thoughts before we sign off for today on this St. Patrick's Day.
I'm just really grateful that Steve came on the show with us, and I just loved how he came on there and it was like a sprint. He didn't hold anything back, and it was so open with us, and it was just fun to listen.
For Broccoli Rob Thompson, for our executive producer, John Mays, and for Dr. Z, I'm J-Dub. Thanks for watching the Dr. Z and J-Dub podcast, and happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody.